Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when the silence of someone we care about becomes louder than words. You reach and they retreat. You give and they withdraw. You pour out love from a cup already empty, hoping, praying that maybe this time they will see your worth. There is a deep misunderstanding that many people carry, often without knowing it. It shows up in our relationships, our friendships, even our professional lives. It's the belief that if you want someone to see your worth, especially someone avoidant or emotionally distant, then you must convince them, explain yourself, and work tirelessly to earn their attention. But I am here to tell you a truth that runs deeper than effort, louder than words, and stronger than any strategy. Your value is not something that needs to be demanded, it's something that must be demonstrated. Let's talk honestly about this. When you feel unseen by someone you care about, especially someone who avoids emotional closeness, the instinct is to try harder. You might text more, initiate conversations, prove your loyalty, show how understanding, flexible, or forgiving you can be. You may shrink yourself just to avoid conflict. And all of this is done in the hope that one day they'll recognize the depth of your love, the weight of your presence, and the purity of your intentions. But here's what's really happening. The more you try to be seen, the more invisible you become. And why? Because the avoidant does not respond to emotional pursuit. They don't interpret it as love, they interpret it as pressure. The very thing you offer and hope becomes the reason they withdraw further. Not because your love isn't real, but because your love in their world feels overwhelming, sometimes even threatening. And so, the more you try to highlight your worth by reaching for them, the more you reinforce their emotional escape mechanisms. And in doing so, you start to lose the very thing that makes you valuable in the first place, yourself, your inner clarity, your peace, your dignity. Now listen carefully, your worth was never meant to be something you argue for. It's not a debate. It's not a courtroom where you present evidence of your loyalty and plead for a verdict of approval. No, your worth is something you embody. It's something you live. It's in the way you carry yourself, the boundaries you keep, the peace you protect, and the silence you allow when words are no longer honored. An avoidant may not realize the gift they are holding when you are always available, always giving, always forgiving, always forgiving. Why? Because people don't value what they don't have to earn or respect. This is not a game, it's human nature. We all, to some degree, calibrate the value of something based on its energy, presence, and self-protection. And when you continually offer your love in spaces where it is not seen, it begins to appear as if it lacks weight, even when it doesn't. So how do you make someone, especially someone emotionally avoidant, see your worth? You stop trying to make them see. You stop performing. You stop chasing. And you return home to yourself. This is not detachment from love. This is devotion to truth. When you step back from proving and start being, your energy shifts. The neediness leaves. The desperation fades. And in its place comes calm certainty. Not arrogance. No, this is not habit. This is not about pride. This is about alignment. A quiet, still, powerful knowing that says, I am worthy of being seen. I do not have to prove my love to be loved. That kind of energy is not invisible. It's unforgettable. And avoidant will begin to feel the shift. Not because you told them you've changed. Not because you explained what they're missing, but because your behavior is no longer reinforcing their avoidance. You're no longer participating in their fear of closeness. You're no longer the safety net they can rely on without giving anything in return. Your actions now say, without anger or manipulation, I love deeply, but I do not love blindly, and something remarkable happens. When your value is demonstrated through self-respect, boundaries, and emotional presence, others begin to see what was there all along. Not because it changed, but because you stopped covering it up with over-effort and emotional overexposure. You gave space for your value to breathe. And in that breathing room, your worth grows. Think of it like this. A painting hanging in a cluttered hallway can be walked past without notice. But place that same painting in a quiet, well-lit gallery, and people stop. They observe, they feel. What changed? Not the painting. The painting. but the setting, the framing, the focus. You are that painting. You've always been. But if you're surrounded by the noise of over-explaining yourself, the clutter of running after validation, the shadows of fear and self-doubt, no one, especially the avoidant, let your life become the gallery where your value is evident, not to prove anything, but to preserve what is sacred in you. And let me say this because it matters. Some people, avoidant or not, may never see your worth until you walk away, until your presence becomes absence. Until the silence teaches what your words could not, but when they do see, it will not be because you convinced them. It will be because you stopped trying to, and if they never see, then bless them and keep walking, because your worth is not dependent on anyone's recognition of it, The moment you start needing them to see it, you give them power over it, and your worth was never meant to be held hostage by someone else's limitations. It is your birthright, your light, your inheritance. It is time to stop arguing for what is already yours. It is time to demonstrate value by living it, by choosing peace over pursuit, by choosing stillness over scrambling, by choosing you, not in rebellion, but in remembrance. You are not here to be tolerated, explained, or edited. You are here to be known, felt, seen, first by yourself, and then by those capable of receiving what you are. So if you're waiting for someone, especially someone avoidant, to finally see your worth, stop waiting, start living, start living, start living. Live so fully in your truth that even silence echoes with your value. And if they come around, let them come. If they don't, let them go. But as for you, rise, shine, and never again apologize for being the kind of love that only those ready for it will recognize. Emotional independence is often misunderstood. Many people think it means being emotionally detached, not needing anyone, or being indifferent to love. But that is not emotional independence. That is emotional avoidance, and it's not healthy. Emotional independence doesn't mean you want connection. It means you are not controlled by your need for it. It means that whether someone comes close or pulls away, you remain whole. You remain centered. You remain you. Centered. You remain. When it comes to relationships, especially with someone who has avoidant attachment tendencies, this principle becomes essential. An avoidant person tends to fear emotional closeness, not because they don't care, but because closeness feels unsafe. Vulnerability to them often feels like a trap. So what happens when you approach them from a place of emotional dependence? When you seek reassurance, closeness, and constant validation, they recoil. Not necessarily because they want to hurt you, but because your emotional need becomes overwhelming for their nervous system. It triggers their fear of losing autonomy. And so without realizing it, the more emotionally dependent you are on their closeness, the more you activate their defenses, the very thing you long for. Intimacy becomes harder to reach. Now consider what happens when you become emotionally independent. Not cold, not distant, but stable, grounded. You are no longer needing their closeness to define your worth. You are no longer needing a reply to validate your presence. You are no longer emotionally hijacked by their silence, their delays, or their mood shifts. You begin to anchor inward. This creates a shift, not only in you, but in the dynamic. Why? Because emotional independence is magnetic. It's attractive in the deepest sense. It doesn't scream or demand to be noticed. It simply is. And in its presence, people feel something they rarely experience: peace. You see, most people, avoidant or not, are used to relationships filled with emotional pressure, expectations, reactions, criticisms, control. They're used to needing to defend themselves or prove something. But when you show up with emotional independence, you offer something entirely different: space, not cold distance, but sacred space. A space where they are free to come close or move away, and your sense of self remains untouched. That's powerful. Because what you communicate, not with words, but with energy, is: I choose you, but I do not need you to complete me. I want connection, but I do not fear disconnection. I am whole, and your presence is a gift, not a requirement. This is the opposite of what most avoidant people are used to. They are used to feeling smothered, overwhelmed, and cornered. But now they begin to feel something foreign: safety. Not the safety of control, but the safety of freedom. You're not trying to change them. You're not trying to change them. You're not trying to force a label, a commitment, or an emotional display. You are simply there, steady, clear, unattached to outcomes. Now here's where it gets interesting. Emotional independence doesn't just shift how others respond to you, it transforms how you experience love. You no longer suffer every time someone pulls away. You no longer panic in their silence. You no longer panic in their silence. You no longer exhaust yourself with questions like, did I do something wrong? Or what can I say to make them stay? Instead, you start asking different questions. Does this relationship honor who I am? Am I compromising my peace to maintain this connection? Do I feel safe being my full self here? Or am I constantly trying to manage someone else's emotions? You stop measuring your worth by someone else's capacity to receive you. You stop looking at their avoidance as a mirror of your inadequacy. You start seeing their behavior for what it is. There's not a reflection of your lack, but a revelation of their own inner world. And because you are now anchored in yourself, you stop trying to rescue them from it. You offer love, not rescue. You offer presence, not pressure. You offer understanding, but not at the expense of your well-being. This is emotional maturity. This is emotional leadership. You begin to relate from your highest self, not your wounded self. You begin to lead with grace rather than grasping. And when you lead that way, people begin to feel safe, not because you're bending to their needs, but because your energy is steady, consistent. You are not ruled by emotional turbulence. You are not reacting to their reactions. You are not reacting to their reactions. You are not trying to force ready. You are simply showing up, calm, open, available, but never dependent. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop needing someone to validate your worth is the moment they begin to truly see it. Why? Because now your energy speaks for itself. It says, I am here because I choose to be, not because I have nowhere else to go. That kind of love is rare. It doesn't beg, it doesn't cling, it doesn't perform. It just is. And in that quiet certainty, something begins to awaken. In the avoidant. They may not know how to express it. They may still resist it, but they feel it. And feelings, especially unfamiliar ones, are hard to ignore. Your emotional independence challenges their belief that closeness always comes with pressure. You become a living contradiction to their story, that love means losing freedom, that intimacy means obligation, that relationships are draining, and if and only if they are open, this challenge can lead to growth. They may begin to question their old patterns. They may begin to feel safe leaning in instead of pulling away because they're not being chased, they're being invited. Now, let's be clear. Emotional independence doesn't mean waiting around in a self-righteous calm for someone to catch up. It's not a tactic. It's not a performance. It's a way of living that says, I trust myself enough to stay rooted even if you are not ready to grow beside me. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away, not in anger, but in alignment. Sometimes the avoidant doesn't change. Sometimes they do. But either way, your emotional independence protects you from being pulled into cycles that diminish your worth. You learn to love with open hands, not clenched fists. You learn to speak your needs without attachment to the outcome. You learn to leave the door open, but not hold yourself hostage waiting for someone to walk through it. That is strength, that is peace, that is power. So if you've ever wondered how to be loved by someone avoidant, start by loving yourself with such depth and clarity that fear can no longer dictate your movement. Let your emotional independence be the lighthouse that guides, not the hook that traps, Let your presence speak louder than your pursuit. Let your self-respect create the rhythm by which others must choose to step closer or step aside. Because in the end, the greatest gift you can give to any relationship is not your need. It is your wholeness. And that wholeness, that inner stability, that unshakable calm, it's magnetic. There is a moment in every relationship, especially with someone emotionally unavailable, where words no longer work. You've talked, explained, reassured, cried, reasoned, and reached. You've spoken from the heart, opened up your soul, tried to show how much love you carry and how deeply you care, but nothing changes. The emotional distance remains. You feel invisible, unheard, unmet. This is where many people begin to fall into despair. They try harder. They love more. They love more. They become hyper aware of every shift in mood, every unread message, every delay in response, and slowly, almost without realizing it, they begin to shrink. Their boundaries blur. Their standards drop. They become so focused on getting the avoided person today that they lose sight of what they truly need. But here is the truth that sets people free. Boundaries speak louder than words, much louder. You don't teach people how to treat you by how much you explain yourself. You teach them by what you allow, by what you reinforce, and by what you walk away from. Boundaries are not ultimatums. They are not punishments. They are the clearest, most respectful form of communication you can ever give, especially to someone avoidant. Why? Because the avoidant doesn't respond well to emotional intensity or demands. They are wired, often through early experiences, to interpret emotional closeness as pressure or enmeshment. So when you constantly express your needs without backing those needs with action, they don't feel invited into closeness. They feel trapped. And not only do they pull away further, but they also begin to take your presence for granted. You may be loving deeply, but if that love comes without boundaries, it feels to them like a weight, not a gift. And worse, to you, it becomes a cycle of resentment, exhaustion, and self-betrayal. So, what does it mean to set boundaries with an avoidant person? It means that you begin to define where you end and they begin. It means you start to separate your worth from their willingness to show up. It means you stop over-functioning in hopes they will finally notice your value. And instead, you begin to withdraw from anything that dishonors your peace. You stop arguing for your needs to be met and start meeting them yourself. You stop waiting for a reply that never comes and start focusing on people who do respond. You stop offering emotional safety to someone who hasn't earned it and start reserving that energy for spaces where it is reciprocated. Your silence, your boundary, your stillness. Your boundary, your stillness, all of these carry a message that no words ever could. You are saying, I love, but I will not beg. I will not beg. You care, but I will not chase. I am open, but I am not available for inconsistency. I'm present, but I am not a placeholder. And that is a powerful shift. Avoidant individuals may not respond to emotional persuasion, but they cannot ignore consequence. When the person they took for granted starts pulling back with grace, not spite, when the emotional availability they once avoided becomes scarce, when the constant emotional reassurance disappears, they feel it, not immediately, maybe not consciously, but they feel it. Because what boundaries do is disrupt the pattern. The avoidant thrives in a dynamic where they feel emotionally pursued and in control. They feel safe when you're doing all the work, when you're initiating, apologizing, soothing, waiting. But when you set boundaries, you remove the imbalance. You stop playing your part in the cycle. You stop being the emotional caregiver and start being the emotional equal. And that shift creates tension, the right kind of tension. It invites reflection. It gives them space to feel the void your overfunctioning once filled. And in that space, they must either grow or go. And let's be honest, not everyone grows. Some will interpret your boundary as rejection. Some will pull away further. Some will test your resolve, hoping you'll bend back into your old role. That is where your strength is tested. Because boundaries are not just about what you say. They are about what you hold. They are not for controlling others. They are for protecting you. They say, I value myself too much to remain in a dynamic that erodes my spirit. They say, I am willing to be alone rather than emotionally abandoned in someone else's presence. They say, this is what I require to feel safe, connected, and loved. And if you cannot meet me there, I will not punish you. But I will not punish you. But I will not lose myself for you. This is not cruelty. It is clarity. Boundaries are one of the highest forms of love because they create conditions where real intimacy can exist. Without boundaries, what you have is not connection. It is codependence. It is emotional chasing. It is emotional chasing. It is self-sacrifice masked as love. And in time, it leaves you hollow. But with boundaries, you honor your needs. You become emotionally sovereign. You create a foundation where both people can show up as their full selves, not just one person carrying the emotional weight for two. And here's something important. Boundaries are not walls. It's sweaty walls. You are not shutting people out. You are simply inviting the right people in, those who can meet you where you are without fear or avoidance. You're saying, this is the rhythm of my heart. I will not slow it down to match your fear, nor will I speed it up to match your silence. And your silence. If you want to join me, match my pace. If you cannot, I release you, kindly, peacefully, fully. And if the avoidant person is capable of growth, if they are willing to face their own fears, your boundary becomes the invitation they didn't know they needed. They begin to see what they risk losing. Not because you threaten them, but because you stop participating in your own neglect. They see your worth when you refuse to prove it. They see your value when you no longer defend it. They see your light when you stop dimming it just to keep them comfortable. That is, keep them comfortable. That is the power. That is the power of boundaries. They do not scream. They do not chase. They do not explain themselves again and again. They stand, they clarify, they protect. And most importantly, they teach. So if you are in a space where you feel unseen, unheard, and unloved, ask yourself, what am I allowing? Because more often than not, the treatment you're receiving is not just about them. It's also about what you've taught them is acceptable. Change the lesson. You don't have to use anger. You don't have to make demands. You don't have to make demands. You don't have to play games. Just pause. Step back. Reclaim your energy and watch what shifts. The avoidant may finally see your worth, or they may walk away. Either way, you win because you have chosen to stand in your truth, to honor your worth, and to make space for the kind of love that does not require you to abandon yourself in order to keep it. That is the kind of love that heals. That is the kind of love that lasts. And that is the kind of love you deserve, starting with the love you show yourself through every sacred boundary you keep. What does it truly take to be seen, valued, and respected by someone who struggles to let love in by someone who struggles to love? It is not louder words. It is not deeper sacrifices. It is not desperate attempts to explain your worth or prove your place in their life. It is your alignment. When you anchor yourself in self-awareness, when you stop performing for connection, when you lead with emotional independence and enforce healthy, loving boundaries, you shift the entire dynamic. You no longer revolve around someone else's fear. You stand in your own light. You reclaim your energy, and you let that speak louder than any demand, any plea, or any performance ever could. The avoidant might change, or they might not, but you will never be the same. You will have learned that your worth is not up for negotiation, that your love is a gift, and your love is a gift and not a strategy. That the most magnetic, powerful thing you can ever be in a world full of masks and defense mechanisms is whole. Let your peace be your voice. Let your presence be your power. And let your standards, not your suffering, be the thing that finally makes them see your worth. And if they never do, you will have seen it for yourself. And that, my friend, is more than enough.